The plane was crowded, flying high in the sky. The engines hummed and passengers talked quietly. Sarah sat in her seat, a single mother in her late 20s. She was tired, very tired. Her partner had died a few months ago, and now she was alone with her 6-month-old son Noah. She held him close, but he wouldn't stop crying. Noah's cries were loud and sharp. They cut through the noise of the plane like a knife. Sarah bounced him in her arms, trying to calm him. Her hands shook from exhaustion, and her face turned red with embarrassment. She didn't know what to do. She just wanted him to stop, but nothing worked. People around her started to look. Some gave her soft, kind looks like they felt sorry for her. Others weren't so nice. A woman nearby shoved earbuds into her ears, blocking out the sound. A man a few rows ahead muttered something under his breath, his voice grumpy. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, sharp like daggers. It made her feel small and helpless. A flight attendant walked by, smiling a little, but it wasn't a real smile. "Need anything?" she asked quickly. Sarah shook her head. She didn't know what to say. She needed help, but she didn't know how to ask. The attendant moved on, leaving Sarah alone again with Noah's cries. Inside, Sarah was breaking. She had been doing everything by herself since her partner died. She fed Noah, changed him, rocked him to sleep, all alone. Most days she managed. But now, on this plane with everyone watching, she felt like she was failing. His cries grew louder and her heart sank deeper. She loved Noah so much, but right now she didn't know how to make things better. The stares, the sighs, the silence from the people around her, it all pressed down on her. She was tired, scared, and starting to think she couldn't do this anymore. Sarah was desperate. Noah kept crying, his little voice getting louder and louder. She tried everything she could think of to make him stop. She rocked him in her arms, moving back and forth, hoping the motion would calm him. It didn't. She whispered soft lullabies, the ones she sang at home, but his wails drowned them out. She even stood up and walked up and down the narrow airplane aisle, squeezing past seats and bags. Nothing worked. Noah's cries only grew stronger, echoing through the plane. Sarah's exhaustion sank deeper into her bones. She felt like she couldn't keep going. Her body hurt. Her arms ached from holding Noah so long, the weight of him pulling at her muscles. Her throat felt tight, like she couldn't swallow or breathe right. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back, not wanting anyone to see. She hadn't slept properly in days, maybe weeks. Every night, she was up with Noah, trying to be everything he needed. Now, on this plane she was falling apart. She thought of her partner, who used to hold Noah so easily. He'd smile, rock him gently, and Noah would quiet down in seconds. That was gone now. She was alone, and the memory made her chest hurt even more. The people around her didn't help. A businessman in a suit sighed loudly, like Noah's crying was ruining his day. He didn't look at her, just stared at his phone, annoyed. A young couple a few seats away glanced at each other, their faces tight with irritation. They whispered something, and Sarah knew it was about her. She felt their judgment like a heavy weight. A mother with 2 older kids sat nearby. She gave Sarah a quick nod, a small sign she understood, but then turned back to her own children. No one got up. No one offered to help. Sarah was on her own, surrounded by strangers who didn't care. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Why couldn't she do this? Why couldn't she make Noah stop crying? She'd read books about babies, watched videos, tried every trick she knew. None of it mattered now. She felt trapped, stuck in this tiny plane with nowhere to go. The walls seemed to close in, the air too thick to breathe. She wondered if she was a bad mother. Other people could calm their babies. Why couldn't she? The questions pounded in her head, loud as Noah's cries. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run away, but she couldn't. She was stuck here with everyone watching her fail. Sarah's hands shook as she held Noah tighter. She was so tired, so overwhelmed. She missed her partner more than ever. He'd know what to do. He'd make it better. But he wasn't here, and she had to figure it out alone. The tears she'd been holding back started to slip down her cheeks. She wiped them away fast, ashamed. She didn't want these people to see her break. But inside she was cracking. This moment, this flight, it was too much. She didn't know how much longer she could hold on. Sarah felt like she was drowning in Noah's cries. The noise filled the plane, and her heart pounded with panic. She didn't know what to do anymore. Then out of the chaos, a deep, calm voice broke through. "Would you like some help?" it said. Sarah looked up, surprised. Across the aisle stood a man. He was tall and very handsome, with sharp features and warm hazel eyes that seemed kind. He wore a fancy suit, perfectly fitted, and he looked confident, like he belonged anywhere. Sarah blinked, unsure who he was or why he was talking to her. This man was James Carter. He was 35 years old, a millionaire who ran a big tech company. He was rich and powerful, but no one on the plane knew that. He was traveling quietly, not on a private jet, but on this regular flight after a stressful business meeting. Even though he had money and a busy life, he didn't act stuck up. His face was gentle and his voice was soft. He didn't look like someone who'd be annoyed by a crying baby. Instead, he seemed like he wanted to help. Sarah stared at him, her hands still shaking as she held Noah. She didn't know if she should trust him. He was a stranger after all. What if he didn't know what to do? What if he made it worse? But then James smiled, a warm, easy smile that made her feel a little less alone. "I've got a niece about his age," he said. "I'm used to this." His voice was steady, like he wasn't worried at all. Something about him made Sarah pause. He didn't seem pushy or fake. He just stood there, calm and strong, like he really meant it. She hesitated. Giving Noah to someone she didn't know felt strange. Her arms tightened around him for a second, protective. But she was so tired, and Noah's cries were still loud in her ears. She looked into James's eyes again. They were kind, not judging her. Maybe he could help. Maybe she didn't have to do this alone right now. Slowly she nodded. "Okay," she whispered, her voice small. Carefully she handed Noah over, her heart racing as she let go. James took Noah like it was the easiest thing in the world. His big hands were gentle, cradling her son with care. He adjusted Noah against his chest, holding him just right. Then he started humming, a soft, quiet tune that floated through the air. Sarah watched, her breath caught in her throat. To her shock, Noah's cries began to fade. His little face, red from screaming, softened. His tiny body stopped fighting and relaxed into James's arms. In just moments, the loud wails turned into small whimpers, then silence. Sarah couldn't believe it. She stood there, frozen, as James rocked Noah gently. He didn't look bothered or annoyed. He just kept humming, his hands steady, his face peaceful. Noah's eyes fluttered, like he might fall asleep. Sarah's chest loosened a little. The weight she'd been carrying, the fear, the exhaustion, started to lift. She didn't know who this man was, but he'd done what she couldn't. He'd calmed her son when she thought no one could. For the first time in hours, the plane felt quiet. Passengers stopped staring. Sarah looked at James, her eyes wide. He glanced back and gave her a small nod, like he understood everything she couldn't say. In that moment, something changed. She wasn't alone anymore. Sarah couldn't believe her eyes. James held Noah so gently, rocking him back and forth like it was natural to him. The loud cries that had filled the plane were gone now. Noah was quiet, his little body calm in James's arms. Sarah felt the tight knot in her chest start to loosen. 4 hours she'd been fighting to hold herself together, but now she could breathe. She watched James, his handsome face soft and focused, and tears pricked her eyes. She blinked them away fast, not wanting him to see. This kindness, it came out of nowhere, and it overwhelmed her. James didn't stop. He brushed a tiny curl from Noah's forehead with his finger, careful and gentle. Then he looked at Sarah and said, "He's a fighter, just like his mom." His voice was quiet but strong, like he meant every word. Those simple words hit her hard. She'd been doubting herself all day, thinking she wasn't good enough. But James said it like it was true, like he could see something in her she couldn't. It cut through the fog of her worry, and for a moment she felt lighter. Noah stayed quiet and the plane felt peaceful. Sarah and James started talking softly, their voices low so they wouldn't wake him. She didn't plan to say much, but something about James made it easy. "I've been alone since my partner died," she admitted, her words shaky. "It's been hard. I'm trying to keep going, but sometimes I can't." She looked down, ashamed, expecting him to brush it off. But James didn't. He listened, his hazel eyes steady on her, not judging. Then he spoke. "I get it," he said. "I lost my sister 2 years ago. She was my niece's mom. I've had to help raise her since then. Grief, it's heavy. You're not alone in that." Sarah looked up, surprised. He understood. He wasn't just some stranger saying nice things, he'd felt lost too. She could hear it in his voice, see it in the way his face softened when he talked about his sister. They were different, he was a man in a fancy suit and she was a tired mom, but right now they were the same. Both of them knew what it was like to lose someone and keep going anyway. It was a connection she didn't expect, something quiet but real, like a thread tying them together for this moment. James didn't act big or important. He could have, he was rich, a millionaire CEO, but he didn't show it. He didn't talk about money or power. Instead he stayed simple, kind, his charm coming from how he listened and cared. He smiled at her, a warm, easy smile, and it made her feel seen. Not as a failing mom but as a person trying her best. They kept talking, sharing small things, how Noah loved the sound of rain, how James's niece liked the same lullaby he'd hummed. It wasn't much, but it felt like a break, a chance to rest. Sarah wiped her eyes, the tears she'd held back slipping out. She laughed a little, embarrassed, but James just nodded like it was okay. For the first time in months, she didn't feel so alone. This man, this stranger, had given her something she didn't know she needed. Someone to share the weight, even just for a little while. The plane kept flying, but for Sarah, everything slowed down. She looked at Noah, sleeping in James's arms, and then at James, his gentle face full of understanding. It wasn't forever, but it was enough. Right now, that was all she needed. The plane kept flying, steady in the sky, but something felt different now. James still held Noah, swaying him gently in his arms. He looked so sure of himself, like the big CEO he was, but there was a warmth in him too, something soft and surprising. Noah stayed calm, his little head resting against James's chest, breathing quietly. Sarah watched them, and a heavy weight started to lift off her. For so long she'd been carrying everything alone. Every cry, every sleepless night. But right now, in this moment, she wasn't by herself. James was there, helping her, and it made her feel lighter than she had in months. Around them, the other passengers began to change. People who had been annoyed before started to soften. The mother with 2 kids, the one who'd nodded at Sarah earlier, looked over and smiled. A real smile this time, warm and kind. It was like she was happy to see Noah quiet and Sarah okay. Even the businessman, the one who'd sighed so loudly, stopped glaring. He glanced at James and Noah, then looked away, his face less angry. The air in the plane felt easier, not so tight and heavy anymore. The sharp stares and quiet grumbles faded, replaced by a lighter mood. People weren't just ignoring her now, they were noticing, and some even seemed to care. Sarah sat back in her seat, her eyes on James and Noah. She couldn't stop watching them. James held her son like it was nothing, like helping was the most normal thing in the world. He didn't act like he wanted anything back. No thanks, no praise. He just did it. And that made her think. Kindness didn't need a reason. It didn't come with rules or a big explanation. It just happened, like the way James had stepped in when she needed it most. She'd spent so long feeling like she had to do everything right, like every mistake meant she was failing. But now, seeing James with Noah, she started to see something else. 4 months, she'd felt invisible, or worse, like people only saw her struggles and judged her for them. Every time Noah cried in public, she'd brace herself for the looks, the sighs, the whispers. She'd thought that's how it would always be, her against the world, alone with her baby. But James changed that. He didn't see a failure when he looked at her. He saw a mom trying her best, and he helped without making her feel small. For the first time in so long, she felt seen, not as someone messing up, but as someone doing all she could. It was a quiet feeling, but it grew inside her, warm and real. The plane hummed along, the sound steady in her ears. James kept swaying Noah, his hands gentle but strong. Sarah let out a slow breath, her body relaxing a little more. She didn't have to fight this battle by herself right now. Someone had stepped in, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And that made her think about all the days she'd felt so lost. Maybe kindness was out there, waiting in places she hadn't looked. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect. Just keep going. She looked at Noah, so peaceful now, and then at James, his calm face focused on her son. The weight she'd carried didn't feel so heavy anymore. For this little while on this flight she could rest. And that was enough to make everything feel different. The plane started to come down, the engines slowing as it got closer to the ground. Sarah sat still, watching James hold Noah. Her son was asleep now, his little face peaceful against James's chest. The crying was gone, and the quiet felt like a gift. When the wheels touched the runway, James looked at her. Carefully, he leaned over and handed Noah back. His hands were gentle, making sure not to wake him. Sarah took her son, feeling his warm weight settle in her arms. James met her eyes, his hazel gaze strong and steady. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice low but clear. The words sank into her, and her breath caught. She couldn't look away from him, her heart beating faster. The plane stopped, and people started to move, grabbing bags and heading for the door. James stood up, tall and handsome in his suit. Before he left, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to her with a small smile. "In case you need anything," he said simply. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of passengers. Sarah looked at the card. It had just his name, James Carter, and a phone number. Nothing else. She didn't know he was a millionaire, a big CEO of a tech company. To her, he was just a kind stranger who'd made her day better. But that was enough. Sarah got up, holding Noah close as she stepped off the plane. The air in the airport felt fresh and her steps were lighter than before. For so long she'd carried everything, her grief, her worries, Noah's needs, all by herself. It had been heavy, like a load she couldn't put down. But today James had lifted some of that weight. He didn't fix everything, but he showed her something she'd forgotten. She didn't have to do it all alone. His kindness, so simple and real, reminded her she was tougher than she thought. She'd made it through this flight, through the crying and the stares, and she was still standing. That meant something. She walked to baggage claim, Noah sleeping against her shoulder. The airport was busy, people rushing, voices echoing, suitcases rolling by. Sarah found a spot near the conveyor belt and waited for her bag. She shifted Noah a little, then pulled the card from her pocket. She looked at it again, running her thumb over the edges. James Carter. She didn't know who he really was, but his face stayed in her mind, those warm eyes, that easy smile. A faint smile tugged at her lips. She didn't call the number, not yet. Her life was messy, full of late nights and baby bottles, and she wasn't sure what she'd even say. But holding that card felt like holding a possibility, something small but bright. As her suitcase rolled by, she grabbed it and headed for the exit. The day had started so hard, Noah's cries, her exhaustion, the feeling of failing. But it ended differently. A handsome stranger had stepped in, not asking for anything, just giving her a moment to breathe. Maybe it was just this one day, this one flight. Or maybe it was more, a start to something she couldn't see yet. She tucked the card into her bag and walked out into the night, Noah warm against her. Whatever came next, she felt ready. Kindness had found her when she least expected it, and it left her stronger than before. Sarah slid into the back seat of the cab, the door closing with a soft thud. Noah was asleep against her chest, his tiny breaths warm and steady. The driver glanced at her through the mirror, gave a quick nod, and started the car. The city lights blurred outside the window as they pulled away from the airport. Sarah leaned her head back, feeling the gentle rumble of the engine. For the first time all day she could rest. Noah's weight in her arms felt comforting now, not heavy. She looked down at him, his little face soft in sleep, and let her thoughts wander. The day played in her mind like a movie. She thought of how it started, trapped on that plane, Noah crying, her hands shaking. She'd felt so alone, like the world was watching her fail. Then she thought of James, the handsome stranger with the kind eyes. He'd stepped in when she needed it most, holding Noah like it was nothing, giving her a break she didn't know how to ask for. She pulled his card from her pocket and stared at it again. James Carter. She didn't know he was a millionaire, a big CEO flying high above everyone else. To her, he was just a man who cared. But that was what mattered. She thought of her partner too. He'd been gone for months, but she still felt him sometimes, in the quiet moments in Noah's eyes. He used to hold her when things got tough, whispering that they'd figure it out together. Losing him had broken something in her, left her carrying wounds she didn't always see. Today, though, those wounds felt a little less sharp. James hadn't fixed them, he couldn't, but his small act of kindness had held her together when she was falling apart. It was like a stitch in a torn shirt, not perfect but enough to keep going. The cab turned down a street, the lights flickering past. Sarah's mind settled on a simple truth. Kindness didn't need a big reason. It didn't come with a price tag or a loud announcement. James didn't help her because he had to, he did it because he wanted to. Up there, 30,000 feet in the air, when she'd felt so low, his help had found her. It wasn't just about calming Noah. It was about showing her she wasn't invisible. She'd spent so long thinking she had to be strong all by herself, that asking for help meant she was weak. But now she saw it differently. Kindness from a stranger, even a handsome one like James, could heal things she didn't even know were hurting. She hugged Noah a little closer, her fingers brushing his soft hair. The driver's voice broke the silence. "Long trip?" he asked, glancing back. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, but it turned out okay," she said, her voice quiet. He smiled. "Good to hear. That little one's lucky to have you." His words were simple, but they warmed her. She thought of James saying she was strong, and now this driver saying Noah was lucky. Maybe they were right. Maybe she'd been too hard on herself, missing the good she was doing because the hard parts felt so loud. The cab slowed at a light, and Sarah looked out at the people walking by, bundled in coats, carrying bags, living their own lives. How many of them felt alone sometimes? How many had a stranger step in when they needed it? She'd always thought people were too busy to care, too caught up in their own worlds. But today proved her wrong. James didn't have to help. He could have stayed in his seat, ignored her like the others. Instead he reached out. That's what stayed with her, the way love and support could show up anywhere, even on a noisy plane high in the sky. They pulled up to her building, the cab stopping with a gentle jolt. Sarah paid the driver and stepped out, the cold air hitting her face. She adjusted Noah, still asleep, and walked inside. The elevator hummed as it took her up, and she unlocked her door, stepping into the familiar smell of home. She laid Noah in his crib, tucking a blanket around him. Standing there, watching him sleep, she felt something settle in her chest. Today had been hard, but it ended with hope. James's kindness, a handsome stranger who didn't know he was a millionaire to her, had shown her that compassion could find a way no matter where you were. She wasn't alone, not really. And that was enough to carry her forward.